The wait is over. The Miami Hurricanes have their starting quarterback, and he's bringing a friend from the 919 to the 305. Darian Mensah, Cooper Barkate, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What a whirlwind, and what a great week it is to be a Miami Hurricane. Miami is not rebuilding after a national championship game appearance. Miami is reloading, and they're trying to finish the job that they started in 2026. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. We'll talk about Miami's stock for the 2026 football season coming up. And by the way, spring football is going to be here in less than 2 months. It's crazy. Cooper Barkate, a top 10 receiver nationally, signs with the Canes, joining his starting quarterback, Darian Mensah. Miami now has one of the top signal callers in the country again. Third straight year. If you thought Mario couldn't do it for the third straight year, was Cam Ward in 2024, goes on to be a #1 overall pick. Was Carson Beck in 2025, who helps lead Miami to the national championship game. And now you get Darian Mensah, fresh off a season where he was the nation's second leading passer. Mario Cristobal has done it again. Yesterday was just a tornado of action. Tuesday morning was when we officially got the word. Statements were released by Mensah's legal team, headed up by Darren Heitner, sports attorney, also Mensah's agency, and then the Duke legal team. They both put out statements confirming that the two sides had settled out of court and that Mensah would be free to transfer to the school of his choice, which we all knew by that time the school of his choice was going to be the University of Miami. So then after the settlement was released, by the afternoon time, Mensah and Barkate were both on campus in Coral Gables making their official visit to Miami. And they got, folks, if you're not aware of the amazing campus tour, golf carting around campus that Miami staffer and former Miami cornerback Mike Rumpf gives, his tours are legendary. So they got the full tour from Coach Rumpf, Barkate, and Mensah, and then they got wined and dined in the evening. I would love to walk in the shoes of one of these recruits or transfer guys when they get taken to Prime 112. Mario Cristobal, Shannon Dawson, Malachi Tony was along for that as well. Edgerrin James was there. They went out to Prime 112 in the evening, out for a nice dinner, and then shortly after that dinner came to a close, you get the official announcements. Darian Mensah has signed with the University of Miami. Cooper Barkate, his top receiver from Duke, has signed with the University of Miami. So as far as Darian Mensah goes, folks, again, for those who didn't watch him this past season at Duke or prior year at Tulane, the talent is through the roof, and this is potential to perhaps be not only a first-round draft pick in a year's time. Now, he actually has 2 years of eligibility left. It's just a question of, does he want to stay in college for 2 more years? Because he has potential to be a first-round pick as soon as next year. And a lot of folks now realizing who Mensah is going to be playing with at Miami. He's going to have a better defense than the one that didn't help him out too much at Duke last year. He's going to have, even though Miami lost some pieces, he's going to have a better offensive line at Miami. Certainly going to have a better running back room because Miami's at least 5 deep at that position, which is crazy. A superior wide receiver room, including his #1 guy, plus Malachi Tony and some other talents that we will talk about. So Darian Mensah, based on what he did last season without all of that extra help, just under 4,000 yards, 34 touchdown passes to only 6 interceptions, second leading passer nationally. If you project what he could do at Miami with all the extra talent and presumably extra wins, because winning does help your case, we're talking about someone who's going to be, I think, one of the top 2 or 3 favorites, if not the favorite for the Heisman Trophy this coming year. Like, that's the potential that Darian Mensah has at Miami. This player, Mensah, completed 67% of his passes last season for 3,973 yards. I mentioned 34 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions. Second leading passer in the country. And if you look at the actual traits, I think what's extra exciting about Mensah, we talked about this earlier this week, he takes some of the best traits from Carson Beck in terms of a quick release, but also combines some of the best traits from Cam Ward in his ability to move and extend plays, okay? He throws the ball well on the run, which is a nice plus, and he always keeps his eyes downfield. Loves to attack downfield, produced a lot of offense on deep throws last year, 1,085 of his just under 4,000 yards, 13 of his touchdowns, and just 2 of his interceptions happened on throws of over 20 yards through the air. So he loves to attack. For Mensah, he had a lot of really good games last year. Excuse my voice for cracking there. I haven't slept a lot this week. I would say that the best game Mensah played this past season at Duke was in that 46-45 shootout win on the road against Clemson. In that game, he completed 66% of his passes for 361 yards, 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. He also lit it up in his final game for Duke. That was against Arizona State in the Sun Bowl. 327 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception in that game. And Mensah, I can't emphasize this enough, he really seems like a perfect fit in Shannon Dawson's offense and is going to allow Dawson to fully open up and unleash the playbook. Because not only does Mensah like to attack downfield, where he led the nation with 86 deep ball attempts last year. Nobody went deep more than Mensah, but he also excels in the quick game. Over 77% of his passes were complete when getting rid of the football in under 2.5 seconds. Okay, so that's also someone getting the football to his playmakers in space is another thing that Darian Mensah excels in. Now, in terms of Mensah arriving at Miami after all of this, if you spend any time on social media, I hope you have a thick skin if you're a Miami fan. And I also hope that you embrace the envy, you embrace the jealousy, and you embrace the hate that's coming from other fan bases. Because, people feel a certain way about Mensah leaving Duke when he had another year on the NIL deal for $4 million. How could he leave his team high and dry? What is Miami doing? Stealing Duke's quarterback. You're going to see a lot of that. But something that people won't talk about in terms of Darian Mensah's point of view, because like I already mentioned, he's going to be one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy this coming season. He's going to have a better opportunity to win a national championship at Miami than he would have with Duke. I mean, he played, insane football last year at Duke, and the ceiling for that team was 5 losses, right? And that, he had a couple turnovers in the Illinois game. Like, he wasn't perfect, but 5 losses were not his fault. That was what was around him. So, people will accuse Darian Mensah of chasing the bag, but they should also talk about what a year at Miami can do for his career trajectory. Darian Mensah saw Cam Ward. Actually, Darian Mensah has worked out with Cam Ward recently, so I'm sure Ward put some good words in for Miami. Mensah saw Cam Ward go from a day 3 pick to number 1 overall at Miami and in Miami's offense, right? Mensah, this is someone who led the ACC in almost every category as a quarterback, still lost 5 games. If he had had the same season at Miami this past year as he had at Duke, we're talking 11-1 or 12-0 regular season, right? Mensah saw Miami reach the national championship game while his own team didn't get into the playoff despite winning their conference. So without question, the University of Miami can give Darian Mensah career opportunities that he likely cannot achieve on the field at Duke. That's the other side of it. People will talk about the money. I think it's also worth talking about the opportunity. And oh, by the way, Miami and Duke, they are going to play this year. They will go head-to-head November 14th at Hard Rock Stadium. That's going to be a little awkward, right? And hopefully Mensah will have, a better outcome because he faced his other former team last year. Duke lost to Tulane last year. I think I would handicap Miami's chances at beating Duke this year a little bit better than Duke versus Tulane last year, but they are going to go head-to-head on November 14th. Folks, we're going to talk about Cooper Barkate, his top receiver, Mensah, who joins him at Miami, and a little bit more about the Darian Mensah timeline of how he landed at the U. You want to keep it locked right here because we're only getting started. Miami's got their quarterback, and Locked On Canes keeps rolling.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. The WNBA has released its 2026 schedule featuring a 44-game regular season beginning on Friday, May 8th. The league's historic 30th season includes expansion teams Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, with opening weekend highlights such as Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hosting Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings, and a rematch of the 2025 finals between the Aces and the Mercury. In Unrivaled, Miami felt the breeze as Paige Beckers powered the breeze to a 75-68 win over the Lunar Owls, finishing with 28 points and 7 assists. She was joined by 20-year-old Dominique Malunga, who added 21 points, 8 rebounds, and became just the second player to ever dunk in an unrivaled game. In college hoops, South Carolina handed Vanderbilt its first loss of the season with a dominant 103-74 win. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And if you're an everydayer, check out the Everydayer Club. Join the all-access tier and get exclusive episodes, exclusive newsletters, one-on-one text messaging with me. I was keeping you guys updated on the Darian Mensah saga for the past several days. Now he's officially a Hurricane. You want to check out the Everydayer Club, go to lockedoncanes.supercast.com or click the link in the show notes below, lockedoncanes.supercast.com. Thank you all for being everydayers. Let's make that status official. All right, so it's not only Darian Mensah, who's arriving at Miami. Cooper Barkate. Now, Barkate was on the visit with Mensah. He was on that golf cart with Mike Rumpf. He was at Prime 112. And, this Miami now at wide receiver is beyond stacked. And, Barkate, he's going to be heavily involved. He will probably most likely start. If not, he'll be heavily involved in the rotation. He and Mensah already have that chemistry. So Cooper Barkate this past season finished 9th in all of college football with 1,106 receiving yards. He caught 7 touchdowns. He also generated 399 yards after the catch, which ranked him 31st nationally in YAC. Now, Cooper Barkate, another thing you love about this edition, you talk about intelligence on the football field. This young man started his college career at Harvard. Was at Harvard for his first 3 seasons. He was, a breakout star in the Ivy League, which, people like, hey, do it in the big leagues. And then he goes to the ACC, and he is 9th in the country in yardage this past year, just building instant chemistry with Darian Mensah. And when you go down those, Mensah film rabbit holes and you see, the numbers and the big plays that he put up at Duke, so many of those big plays, it was Cooper Barkate on the other end of it, with Mensah able to buy time in the pocket, looking deep down the field. Barkate only had 6 drops all season last year with a ton of targets, and most of his drops were early in the year. He cleaned up on that later in the season. This is going to add a super potent weapon for Darian Mensah to have Cooper Barkate, whether he's starting or part of the rotation. This dude is going to play a lot this year. And if you look at what Miami now has at the wide receiver position, so you add Cooper Barkate off an 1,100-yard season. You have Malachi Tony coming in coming back off of an 1,100-yard season. It was great to have Tony. Tony was also at that Prime 112 dinner on Tuesday night. So he's getting to know QB1. He's getting to know, one of his fellow receivers. And I love the opportunity to build that team chemistry and camaraderie, and these guys getting to know each other. And, Malachi Tony, you talk about, again, I mentioned Darian Mensah as a top Heisman Trophy candidate. Mally, baby Jesus, is going to be right there in that mix as well. Rightfully so. I mean, if Tony wasn't a true freshman who people didn't expect to break out last year, had he been on the radar before the season started, now he was on our radar. I'm talking about the national radar, which he was not on. Malachi Tony should have been not necessarily a finalist, but on the short list for the Heisman Trophy last year. And he's definitely going to enter this coming season on that Heisman radar, because as we saw from Tony this year, he doesn't just do it as a pass catcher. He does it as a blocker, which at his size is remarkable how he could put dudes onto the turf and on their butts. He also throws passes. He runs. This is an all-purpose weapon to the 10th degree. So you got Malachi Tony and Cooper Barkate joining forces. You also have Josh Moore heading into his sophomore season, who I think is really ready to break out as a big, deep threat. Moore had some good flashes this year. Dalen Upshaw, coming in as a sophomore now, coming back as a sophomore, had some flashes his freshman year. I think his workload is going to go up. You've got a couple of more important transfers. It's not just Barkate, folks. Vandrevius Jacobs from South Carolina, coming off a 548 receiving yards year, 17 yards per catch this past year at South Carolina. And I know we're going to talk probably later, either this week or early next week, with the portal overlord, Brian Smith. Brian is positively glowing about how good Vandrevius Jacobs is. That's a player that he rates. And, Jacobs, he had probably his best game of the season was against Clemson, who's going to be on Miami's schedule on the road this year. So he'll try to do it again against Clemson. Cam Vaughn comes in from West Virginia off of a 541 receiving yards year and 15.5 yards per catch last year. And that's not even including the true freshman, right? I heard wonderful stories about how good Samorian Wingo already is playing scout team during Miami's playoff run as an early enrollee. Samorian Wingo is someone who can make some noise immediately. I also believe Milan Paris, big target, can make some noise immediately. Vance Spafford, Tyron Evans also coming in. Miami is going to be super deep at wide receiver. You've got a 6-player rotation before you even include the true freshman. So Darian Mensah is going to have plenty of weapons. He should have very good protection. I know that the offensive line is going to be younger this year. If Jackson Cantwell probably starts at right tackle, you're going to have a new left tackle starter as well. Either Matt McCoy, I think that'd be the favorite to start there. Samson Okunlola also in the mix, but he may start at left guard. You're going to have a different starting center, whether it's Ryan Rodriguez or S.J. Alofa-Tuli. Maybe Jamal Mayweather possibly as the starting right guard, but there's going to be a few players in the mix there competing. But these are all really, really good players, and they're well coached by Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal. So even though you have some new pieces, the offensive line should be really good. And then, of course, it's worth noting that the quarterback you have now in Mensah, it's not to say you don't want to protect him. You obviously do. But with his mobility and his ability to extend plays, he's a little bit less dependent on a clean pocket, than Carson Beck, who's more of your prototypical quarterback. So, Mensah can do a little bit more if the protection is not perfect. But I want the protection to be perfect anyway. And you want the run blocking to be A+, because you've got Mark Fletcher back. Didn't have to come back, but he's here again. You keep Gerard Pringle, which was huge. You keep Jordan Lyle, which was like the cherry on top of the sundae, because I wasn't expecting that. I didn't expect Lyle to come back too, and Marty Brown you're keeping. And you're adding Javion Mallory, and you still have Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, who can be dangerous. So you're talking about an offense that should absolutely be able to shine with Darian Mensah as your starting quarterback. Now, one of the big questions that people are asking, I do not have the answer to this yet, is what jersey number is Mensah going to wear at Miami? Because people want to go out and buy their Mensah jerseys, right? He wears or has worn the number 10, but there's only one little problem there. Miami's number 10 on offense, Malachi Tony, you may have heard of him. He's got his stock is pretty high, right? So does Tony, and he's a nice dude, Malachi Tony. Like if Mensah really wants the number 10, does Tony let him have it? Maybe Tony can switch to the number 1, which is now open with JoJo Trader's departure, or does Mensah take number 1? There was something on Mensah's Instagram story with a number 0 jersey on it. I don't know if that means anything or if that was like a generic thing, but maybe Mensah takes the number 0. I would say, first of all, I don't really care that much what number anybody is wearing. Just go out there and play. Shine. But I know I'm not the only one because I bought a Malachi Tony jersey for my son this season. A lot of you out there bought Mally jerseys. Some of you even got them signed by Malachi with the number 10, right? I guess selfishly, because my soon-to-be 8-year-old kid has a number 10 Malachi Tony. I guess I'd like Malachi to keep the number 10 and maybe Mensah settle on a different number, but that's something that's going to be settled another day. Folks, Miami also, by the way, I know this got kind of lost in all the Mensah craziness. Miami added a former Florida State Seminole on defense. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Oh, we're certainly not done with game time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Folks, I love being able to see the all-in price up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. Being able to see the view from your seat in the app before you buy makes the decision so easy. The zone deals stand out. You choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Folks, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. You download the Game Time app, create your account, and then use Locked On, our code Locked On, and they'll give you $20 off your first purchase. It's that simple. That's code Locked On for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's game time. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the Atlantic Coast Conference. We've been talking a lot about the Mensah situation, about ACC scheduling. You got a bunch of games on Friday night this coming year. Miami's got 3 Fridays. Florida State has 3 Fridays. I don't, honestly, Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Now, the thing about the Friday, just for me, selfishly, I don't mind a Friday night college football game for Miami because then I've got my entire Saturday free to watch everybody else. But the issue that I have is the same issue Mario Cristobal has. Friday night is high school football night. So it's really hard when you've got a home game on a Friday. It just makes it that much harder to get visitors, recruiting visitors, because they're not going to skip their high school games necessarily probably not to visit your campus. So that it's not convenient to have those Friday night games from a recruiting point of view. So even if it works for Donno, it may not work for Mario. And that's a little bit of a problem. And Miami has 3 Friday night games this year. So the Hurricanes, not only did they add Cooper Barkate, Darian Mensah, Miami also added yesterday former Florida State Seminole safety, spent his first 2 years in Tallahassee, spent this past season at Oregon State. Conrad Hussey, former St. Thomas Aquinas standout, is now a Miami Hurricane. And, man, I'll tell you, the transfer portal, it brings us to so many of these deja vu moments, right? It happened with Jarquez Carter, when he committed to Miami out of the portal, like guys that Miami heavily recruited in high school. So 3 cycles ago, Miami was heavily involved in the recruitment of Hussey out of St. Thomas Aquinas. Like it came down to like the very final day when he announced his final decision picking Florida State over Miami. I believe Miami came in second in Conrad's recruitment. And then you fast forward a few years and he ends up being a Miami Hurricane anyway. It's certainly been a journey for Hussey, who had some standout moments at Florida State. His 2 seasons there had 40 tackles, an interception, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles. Now there was, when he left the team, you know, I don't know how much of this was confirmed, but there were rumors about like an altercation with a coach. So I don't exactly, it's probably the signs of, you know, not a good football culture there and a you know, broken locker room and all that. So I think Hussey can thrive more at Miami if there was an off the field issue there. But so he appeared at Florida State. He appeared in 19 games across the 2023 and 2024 seasons. He made 3 starts in 2024 for Florida State against SMU, Boston College, and Memphis. Now, Hussey, again, this is a player like 3 years ago. If I told you, hey, he's going to end up a Hurricane, I'd be thrilled. And I am thrilled he gets this opportunity. I look at this as an important depth piece in the defensive backfield. I was talking about Hussey with Brian Smith, who not only hosts the Portal, he also hosts Locked On Seminoles. And, you know, Hussey is someone who can definitely factor into the safety or the nickel rotation, can play both of those spots. And nickel's going to be interesting because, you know, you're losing the best nickel in the country, or Keontae Scott. Now, Omar Thornton, who Miami already picked up from Boston College, you know, I think is someone who can absolutely play a role potentially as the starting nickel, but maybe that's something Hussey can also compete for and play in that spot. He's also capable of playing free safety, which I think he's going to be an important depth piece at that spot. So this is a nice addition. And, you know, Miami's defensive backfield, not just, of course, with Hussey and Thornton, but, you know, bringing back Damari Brown, which was an underrated retention, right, to keep Damari Brown. I know he struggled with injury, but he's been really good when he's been on the field. You know, to be able to keep Xavier Lucas and O.J. Frederic, of course, and Zechariah Poyser coming back at safety. Miami's defensive backfield should be really good, and Conrad Hussey is someone who can help fortify that rotation now that he's a Hurricane, and hopefully he can kind of have his renaissance year and revitalize his career at Miami. Because I will say this, I know it's easy for someone to say, hey, what he's done at other spots and write someone off. You know, when Miami last year in the portal, when they added Keontae Scott, like Keontae Scott, nobody expected him to have the year that he just had. I remember talking to Auburn folks, because that's where Keontae previously played, and they were like, yeah, good luck with Keontae Scott. Here's all the things he doesn't do well. And Scott was, you know, almost a perfect player in the defensive backfield this past year. So he was able to develop and improve his stock at Miami. And Jacoby Thomas, same thing. Like, people from Tennessee were not that sad to lose Jacoby Thomas. They didn't think that much of him. And Jacoby comes in and had one of the best years of any safety in the country. So you never know how someone's going to fit in a different situation and a different location, and if they can find their groove. And so maybe Conrad Hussey can do that at the University of Miami. Oh, man, I want to reflect here a little bit more on the Darian Mensah timeline and why we're so thankful. We are so thankful that Miami now has their QB1. So this whole saga started on Friday, January 16th. That was when you started to get reports like in the early afternoon, hey, Duke is worried that Darian Mensah is going to enter the transfer portal. And that news did come out that he was requesting to hit the portal on Friday, January 16th. Then reports throughout the weekend. Remember, that was also championship game weekend, so we were very busy. Reports throughout the weekend indicated that they were negotiating a buyout for his exit behind the scenes and that Duke would not pursue legal action. But then on Tuesday morning, Duke woke up and chose violence. They reversed course. They filed a temporary restraining order to to keep Mensah from enrolling at any other school or signing with any other football team. Now, the only thing that Mensah initially was granted by that judge was that Duke would be required to enter his name into the transfer portal, and that Duke waited till literally the last second to do that. Their deadline was 11:59 p.m. on that Wednesday, and that's exactly when they entered him into the portal. And so then a hearing was scheduled for February 2nd, but Mensah filed an emergency motion for an earlier hearing, citing that, hey, waiting any longer to enroll at a school would jeopardize his ability to enroll in classes for the spring semester. His hearing was moved up just a few days to Thursday, January 29th, so it would have been happening tomorrow. But then this past Sunday, CBS Sports reported that Mensah's legal team and Duke were still talking behind the scenes about a possible settlement outside of the courts that they would make privately before the Thursday hearing. And that's exactly what happened. They just struck their agreement yesterday, and Mensah was released from his exclusive NIL rights deal. The two sides signed a joint motion to terminate the temporary restraining order, and then once that was approved by a judge in Durham, that was when Miami was able to officially sign Darian Mensah as their starting quarterback. So now the expectation for Miami. The Hurricanes should be conservatively ranked in the top 5 of every 2026 preseason ranking. I don't see how you could have Miami outside the top 5 with the playmakers that they have on both sides of the football, but especially now on offense. Like, you expect this offense is going to look more like the 2024 offense, and then if the defense can keep looking like the 2025 D, Miami's not just a top 5 team, I think they're a top 2 or 3 team with those assumptions in place, right? Mensah comes in with, the expectation, but also the pressure to rise into the first round of the NFL draft and to be a Heisman candidate this year. It's going to be a fun season, folks. Make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe to Locked On Canes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your pods. Make sure you join the Everydayer Club, LockedOnCanes.supercast.com, and we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.